When was the last time the fear of a no paralyzed you? Think about it for a moment. That business opportunity you did not pursue, the conversation you never started, the raise you did not ask for, all postponed, perhaps lost, because of the power of a single word. You felt the alarm go off in your brain, the hesitation that froze your actions at the exact moment you needed them most. This feeling, this paralysis, is not a character weakness. It is a program. This silent frustration of always being the nice guy who gets left behind, of feeling that your career and your social life are trapped by an invisible force. We are going to decode that force today. This video is not about positive thinking or empty advice. It is about finding the switch for that primitive alarm in your brain and finally turning it off. Today, you will understand why your brain confuses social rejection with a death threat. And more importantly, you will receive the tools to rewrite that code. We are going to install a new operating system, a mental framework that not only neutralizes fear, but uses rejection itself to build unshakable power and genuine respect. The goal here is not to stop receiving no's. The goal is to become the kind of man for whom a no means absolutely nothing. 1. The science behind it. Why your brain confuses social rejection with a death threat, and how to deactivate that alarm. To disarm this fear, we first need to understand its architecture. At the center of your brain, there is a primitive structure called the amygdala. Think of it as a threat detector, a bodyguard operating on 100,000-year-old software. For our ancestors, being rejected by the group, being expelled from the tribe, was a death sentence. Solitude meant vulnerability to predators, hunger, and the environment. Social rejection was a death threat. Your brain evolved to treat social exclusion with the same panic it would treat a predator approaching in the darkness. The problem is that this software has never been updated. Today, a no from an investor, the silence after a question on a date, or being interrupted in a meeting do not threaten your survival. But for your amygdala, the alarm that goes off is exactly the same. This is not just a feeling. It is physiological. Neuroimaging studies show that the pain of social rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Your anguish is real. It is registered in your neurology. You are not being weak or overly sensitive. You are operating with a program that identifies the wrong threat, an evolutionary bug that sabotages you. And that is the key. This transforms the problem. The fear of rejection ceases to be a character flaw and becomes a technical problem. And if it is a mechanism, it can be understood, calibrated, and ultimately controlled. You do not argue with a fire alarm that went off because of smoke from the toaster. You turn it off and adjust the sensitivity. We will do the same with your brain. 2. Mental model. The calculated indifference strategy to decapitate fear. Your goal is not the yes. So, how does this cerebral recalibration begin? The first step is not an external action. It is a fundamental internal change, a complete redefinition of what it means to win an interaction. Your strategic error, until today, has been to play to get the yes. You tie the success of your action to the other person's validation. Men of power and influence, real or archetypes like Harvey Specter, do not play for approval. They play to execute the move. The victory for them is not in the response they receive. It is in the clarity and courage to make the move. This is where we install a new mental model, calculated indifference. It is a framework where you shift your locus of control from external to internal. Your goal is no longer the yes. Your goal is the execution of the action, asking the question, presenting the proposal, giving your opinion. Flawless execution is success. The yes is a bonus. The no is just data. Think of a power archetype like Harvey Specter. When he enters a room for a negotiation, he is not tense, anxiously waiting for his offer to be accepted. He presents the facts, establishes his framework, and observes the other side's reaction like a strategist. His posture, his tone, and his self-perception do not change whether the immediate response is positive or negative. Because his value is not tied to the response, his power was demonstrated in the act of making the offer on his terms. Bring this to your reality. In a work meeting, when you have an idea, with this new model, your goal is not for everyone to approve your suggestion on the spot. Your goal is to articulate that idea with maximum precision and authority, to present your reasoning in an unshakable way. The act of taking the floor and contributing with strategic value, that is the victory. The rest is just the game unfolding. By doing this, you take the power away from the other person and bring it back to yourself. You cannot control their response, but you can 100% control your action. And it is in this domain that genuine confidence is forged. 3. Rejection microdosing tactic. How to use small daily no's to inoculate your nervous system against fear. Intellectual knowledge, by itself, does not recalibrate a nervous system. Theory needs to become practice. Confidence is a muscle, and like any other, it needs to be trained with progressive resistance. That is why the most powerful tool to start with is not a great leap, but a series of small, calculated steps. We call this rejection microdosing. Think of it as a vaccine for fear. You do not develop immunity to a virus by exposing yourself to a massive load on the first day. You receive a small, controlled dose that teaches your body to react without collapsing. The same principle applies here. Your training begins with very low-risk actions, where the outcome is irrelevant. The only objective is to collect harmless no's to prove to your brain that it is safe. For example, at the coffee shop, after placing your order, ask calmly, "What is the best discount you can give me today?" The answer does not matter. The action does. In a bookstore, ask for help finding a book that you are sure does not exist. Ask a stranger for directions to a place, even if you already know the way. What happens when you do this? Their response is irrelevant. What matters is that you survived the no. Every time you execute the action, and the world does not fall apart, you send a clear data signal to your amygdala. False alarm. Survival is not at risk. You are literally rewriting your fear response in real time. The key here is deliberate progression. Being reckless and jumping to high-risk challenges too early is counterproductive. This does not train your system. It just overloads it, reinforcing the trauma of rejection. Start small. Become indifferent to the small no's first. Build the foundation. This is not about being inconvenient. It is about becoming your own coach. It is a protocol to systematically desensitize your nervous system, transforming paralyzing fear into a neutral and ultimately irrelevant stimulus. 4. The dopamine trap. How the need for external validation addicts your brain and sabotages your power decisions. While you practice microdosing, there is a more subtle internal enemy that needs to be exposed. Because the problem is not just the fear of no. It is the addiction to yes. The yes is a neurochemical drug. Every time you seek and receive external validation, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation. You feel good. And like any addict, your brain starts to do everything it can to secure the next dose, which means avoiding at all costs anything that threatens that supply. This is where the trap closes. Your brain, now dependent, begins to see the no, not just as a rejection, but as a withdrawal crisis. This forces you unconsciously to make safe decisions, to be the nice guy who never disagrees, to avoid any confrontation. You are no longer in command of your decisions. They have been silently outsourced to your chemical need for external approval. You live in defense mode, afraid to expose yourself. Now, observe an archetype like Tommy Shelby. He operates on a completely different system. His decisions are not guided by the need for approval from his family, his partners, or his enemies. They are guided by a long-term strategy. His validation does not come from outside. It is generated internally, from the control he exerts and the results he builds himself. He commands respect. He does not ask for it. To escape this chemical prison, you need to change the source of the reward. And this is where calculated indifference becomes your tool for liberation. By defining your action as the victory, you hack the system. The dopamine is no longer released by the other's response, but by your act of courage. The satisfaction comes from within, from staying true to your decision, not from outside. You stop being a beggar for validation and become the sole supplier of your own self-confidence. You take control of your own internal chemistry. 5. The final power test. How to maintain the frame after rejection and transform a no into respect. Once you take control of your internal chemistry, the next level is to project that calm and power to the outside world. This is where we go from just surviving rejection to mastering the situation. This is the final test of social power. The key concept here is framing or frame control. Think of the frame as the lens through which an interaction is viewed. The person who defines the perspective, who controls the context, is in command. Reacting with anger, frustration, or submission to a no is to give away your power. It is to let the other person define the frame of your defeat. Maintaining the frame after rejection is a demonstration of higher status, and it is done with calibrated micro-behaviors. First, the calculated pause. When you hear the no, do not respond immediately. Pause for 2 full seconds. Breathe. This short pause breaks the chain reaction of panic and projects unshakable control. It communicates that the information was received, processed, and did not destabilize you. Second, the slow nod and calibrated agreement. After the pause, a slight nod of the head and a neutral response like understood or right. I appreciate the clarity. Your calm becomes a force. This communicates that you did not need their approval. You just collected information. Your assertiveness is demonstrated in your composure. Third, strategic redirection. You then smoothly move the conversation to the next point or end the interaction on your terms. You demonstrate that the rejection was not an obstacle, just a curve in the road. Observe figures of power. When a judge denies a motion to Harvey Specter, he does not fall apart. He absorbs the information, pauses, and moves on to the next argument. His unshakable composure in the face of adversity is what makes him dominant. When you react this way, the subconscious message you send is immensely powerful. My self-perception and my value are not defined by you. This demonstrates a core of confidence so solid that the other's rejection cannot penetrate it. Ironically, your ability to handle their no is what, in the end, commands their respect. You did not just survive the rejection. You used it to establish your status. Conclusion. Let's recap the strategy. The path to destroying the fear of rejection is not a trick. It is a process of internal engineering. First, you recognize that fear is a broken alarm, an outdated program, not a flaw of yours. Second, you redefine your goal with calculated indifference. Victory is the action, not the approval. Third, you train your nervous system with daily microdoses of rejection, like a vaccine, to desensitize it. Fourth, you free yourself from the chemical prison of dopamine by stopping the search for external validation. And fifth, you learn to master the moment after the no, using frame control to transform rejection into respect. These are not just tactics for difficult conversations. They are tools for sculpting a new identity. An identity that does not seek permission to act. An identity that finds its validation in the very act of courage, not in the approval of others. It is about stopping living in defense mode and starting to operate in command mode. If this framework has changed your perspective and given you a clear plan, show your support with a like and now a commitment. Comment below. What is the first microdose of rejection you are going to apply tomorrow? Writing, "This is not for me." It is a contract with yourself. For years, the fear of rejection has cost you opportunities, relationships, and ultimately, the life you should be commanding. As of today, that debt ends. The question you must ask yourself is no longer, what if they say no? The question that defines your future is, who will you become when their answer simply does not matter anymore? The answer is unshakable.